So hey Rick, man, you know what's awesome?
What's that, buddy?
Going to the mall.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be awesome.
Yeah, now it's not, but
Now it's so not. But um, this my daughter. I was looking scrolling through Instagram or not Instagram, just some website that was like abandoned places, and there was this gallery of all these abandoned malls,
yeah.
and a lot of them have been torn down, but and I'm familiar with the abandoned mall concept because we had written that book a couple years ago about the haunted abandoned mall. But my daughter was just fascinated. She was looking at it and stuff, and she's like, "Where are these places?" And I was like, "Baby, they used to be everywhere. Like
Mhm.
that used to be where kids went. It's like we didn't have the internet. We didn't, and she was like, "Well, show me pictures of them when they were new." So I pulled up just a Google search image gallery of malls from the '80s with the arcades and the
Yeah.
all the different stuff, and she was just in love. She was just like, "Oh my god, this looks like the coolest place in the world." And I was like, it certainly had its special place in the hearts and minds of people our age, because if it pretty much you we were all mall rats to
Yeah.
some extent. I mean, it was especially if you lived in the South where it's hot as all hell and you don't have some kind of a creek or a lake to go play in. You went and hung out in the mall because it was air conditioned.
Yeah.
So, watched movies and played video games and stuff. So, you
Yeah.
know, in
Def.
the what's awesome sort of stuff, let's talk
Yeah.
about the mall, man.
It was kind of everything at the time. Unfortunately, the closest one to me was an hour away. But you would wake up in the morning, jump in the car. This is back when Becky and I were in our teens, and you went to the mall and you pretty much stayed there all day. And
Hmm.
you're hitting all the places. You're eating in the court, the food court, and it was just an experience that you didn't get anywhere else. And another cool thing about it is we would go to Jackson, which, like I said, is about an hour away. And Jackson had a pretty good sized mall. It's called the Old Hickory Mall, and they had a Sears store in there. And my great uncle worked for Sears for years, so we'd always stop and see him for a while, and so it just brings back a bunch of family memories as well. But yeah, man, it's really hard to make a different generation understand the impact of the mall life because now everything is so instant.
Hmm.
And back then it was, you know, you went there, you looked for the new cool things, you went to Camelot music,
Uh
and
huh.
so I'm sure we'll talk about those as we go along. But it was an event, and every movie that you watched from that time that was a teen movie, they're hanging out in the mall.
Hmm. Very much. Well, and that's one of those things because one of my, so my earlier memories, just being a little child, um, when we moved away, when I was, hold on.
She
Okay.
walking the dog.
So, when I was a little kid, my aunt one of my aunts and uncle lived across the street, and then my other aunt lived like 2 blocks away. So, my mom and my two aunts would get in the car. Um, this is how young I was. It took there was a like a stop sign and then a straight and then a turn either right or left to get to my aunt's house. And when I was a little kid, I thought that the turn signal literally meant we're almost there. Like that like we're here. Like the turn
Yeah,
signal meant because she was turning at the halfway point because
yeah,
whatever. But every day, like every day, every other day, we'd go to the mall, and that the We Are Family. I got all my sisters and me. They used to sing that together, going to the mall. And like they're all in their early 20s. I was born like when my mom was 19 or 20 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
So we'd go over to the mall and they would just shop all day.
Yeah.
And there's food courts and water fountains and toy stores and all kinds of mess that was just. So yeah, I mean, when you're a little kid, that's just kind of like a big part of your world. And then whenever you get a little bit older, some cultures have, like some kind of a painful ritual for Americans in the 80s. Being able to be at the mall by yourself without your parents was a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the first time that your parents would just drop you off with your friends and you could just go to the mall without supervision. That was a milestone right there.
Yeah.
Again, like not anymore, because like I'd be like, hey, I'm going to drop you off at the mall. My daughter would be like, why? Like, what am I supposed to do here?
Well, even with school trips. So I remember us going to the Mid-South Fair, and included going to the Mid-South Fair we're going to the Memphis Mall. I mean, it was that big it was just as big of a deal to go to that as it was to go to the World's Fair, And the thing is, this is why it sticks out in my mind so much, is because, well, unlike the internet, you were only exposed to what was right there in front of you. You didn't know that other things existed unless you physically could see them in front of you that was to purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I saw my first pair of sunglasses that had paint splatters all over them.
Oh yeah.
And of course I bought them, and I thought those were the coolest things ever invented. So it's amazing how that trip to the mall is that thing that sets you up with these. You think you found the newest, coolest thing, and they were pretty cool.
Oh man, so yeah, dude, we like being a little kid going to the mall. My grandparents would come into town, and my dad used to joke that if my grandparents had their way, like some people would travel and go to different battlefields or historical places or houses or museums. My grandparents would tour the world's malls because they would just love a mall. They'd go to a mall and just dig in for hours. And so getting bigger, you've got so many cool things. Like you mentioned, like Camelot Music, like a bona fide record store.
Yeah.
And it's like these certain things that have gone by the way because it's just so easy on Amazon. It's like digital and streaming is just so simple.
Yeah.
That you forget a couple of things, like the thrill of the hunt. Like, okay, what do they have? And then, if you're like me, because I always read liner notes, and we've talked about music so much, so I don't want to turn this into a music show, but it's like you didn't have the music genome where if you like a certain tempo and certain tonal qualities that the computer would just find bands for you. You had to read liner notes and find out who those bands toured with and figure out like what they liked and what influenced them in order to find something that was similar that you liked.
Yeah.
So, you'd go to the music store and you'd flip through the racks. You just flip through records and tapes and CDs. And sometimes they'd have it on one format or another. Like when CDs really started taking off, and, cassettes were kind of on their way out, you'd buy a CD and then you'd buy a box or, a pack of tapes.
Right.
And then tape the CD onto the cassettes.
So you could take it around and play it on everything else that was not a standalone CD player at the time. Exactly.
You can have one in your car, you have it in your Walkman or whatever. But the CD format was that was where it shined. You can put a CD in, press record, mix tapes, whatever. But going to the music store, and it was always great because and that was also one of those things like you always wanted to work there. Yeah. It's like like if I could get my first job, it wouldn't be at the grocery store stocking milk. It would be at the record
Absolutely.
store, because that's where the cool kids
Absolutely.
are.
It's where
And
you and you share your nerdness over, knowing all the inside news of the bands, and get to hear tracks that you didn't realize were somebody else's. The remakes, and I mean, just the whole world of that was always something I was interested. I do remember, because of the way it was written out. The first time I saw it, I thought it was said Cram-a-Lot, because they had that like English C at the beginning, but it had the little crook on the top, and it looked like an R, a little bitty R by the. So I thought it was
yeah.
Cram-a-Lot when I first saw it. But I remember walking in there for the first time, because before that, all the other record shops I'd been to was either like a Walmart or a mom and pop kind of shop, right?
hmm
So walking into Cram-a-Lot, and there's, I don't know, 100 people in there picking out music, and I'm just amazed. I mean, this is like one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And they had, it's the first time I've seen a place where they had like the top 100 songs on 45s on the wall.
Oh
And
wow,
yeah, I mean, they had the top
that's
100 that were being played on the radio in 45 formats on the wall. And it was numbered. It would let you know where, I mean, so I guess I'd hate to be the guy that had to change that every week, right?
right. like an old school scoreboard.
But what was cool is and this is just that early memory stuff, man. This is before my big jump into full blown cassettes. But they had a thing where you bought 3 45s for, I don't know, $3 or something like that. And it's just amazing how the details remain, because I remember walking out of there and I had a copy of Promises, Promises by Naked Eyes, Africa by Toto, and She's a Beauty by the Tubes. You know,
That's not bad.
yeah. I mean, so I was like, woo! And I did make another trip later and picked up 3 more, mainly because I heard Putting on the Ritz by Taco. Ended up getting that on 45.
That's
But Camelot was it, man. Camelot I thought was the coolest thing ever till I saw a Suncoast.
the movie theater, the movie store.
Man.
Yeah. See, we didn't have. I guess we might have had Camelots, but we had Sam Goody's
Oh yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Which exact same thing.
Yeah.
It's a music store. I remember they had all of their walls were cassettes, and the cassettes were
Yeah.
stacked vertically
Yep.
in those little cassette holder
Yeah.
things.
The plastic
The
things
plastic thing
yeah.
to keep them from stealing. And then they had CDs, and you remember when CDs used to come in the long boxes.
Yep.
So it was. I mean, it was similar to an album cover. Even when I was very little, I like understood like the record sleeve, because the record sleeve with all the pictures and everything on it acted as a storage solution for your record.
Yeah.
But the CD things, like, it was more of just a space filler for the rack. But it would have like if you look at a CD, you see the album cover, and then it slips into that other plastic over thing, and it had a much more detailed cover and sometimes lyrics on the back. It was really neat,
Right.
but I always
Yeah.
threw them. I always got rid of them.
Well, you
Never
try
held
to
on to them.
you try to keep them, but they get damaged, or
Yeah.
I still think I got a few folded and put back somewhere. But I think it was that thing of here's another format. Everybody always complained about 8 tracks and cassettes because you didn't get the bells and whistles that you could get in an album. Being a Kiss fan, there was nothing more disappointing than, Kiss Alive 2 had a big book that folded out. It had all this extra stuff. It had Kiss tattoos that you could put on. And you buy the cassette, guess what? You don't get jack,
Right, you got nothing.
And, that album is known for opening it up, and there's a shot of them raised up in the air and all the explosions, kind of like saying, can your band do this? You don't get any of that with the cassette. And I think a CD, in the early days, they still hadn't totally wrapped their heads around, hey, we could take all that stuff that's in the album and just make a smaller version of it and put it inside the actual jewel case. They got smarter about that as they went along. I guess because it seemed like with the cassette boom, it got to where it was about having all the lyrics, which were so
Hmm.
small that you couldn't read them anyways. But
But oh man, but I remember the days of just laying on my bed, folding those
oh yeah,
lyrics out, listening and reading, and
yeah,
oh yeah. And then like you mentioned, Suncoast. Suncoast was
oh
like that was like a mirror image of the record store. It was just movies. So once you
yeah,
got done, going through the record store, you go down the hall a little bit, and there was everything on Laserdisc
yeah.
and VHS,
VHS. Yeah.
and they always had those badass cardboard stand ups
Yep.
for the movies coming out. So you'd get them like I had one in my room for a long time. It was a life size RoboCop for RoboCop 2.
Wow.
Yeah, I wish I had held on to that thing because I mean it was huge. I don't know where I would have like through all of my apartments and party houses and stuff. I don't. They wouldn't have survived without a mustache or something, but it was still pretty awesome.
Man.
But yeah, I had a RoboCop standee that I got, and
Man. I spent a mint in Suncoast, man. I've still got a stack of old VHS. Pretty much bought every Godzilla movie that came out that you could buy that was crap. I think they're even like Good Times versions, right? I mean, they were not good quality, but that's all you could get at the time, right?
mm-hmm.
But yeah, man, every week I'd be spending my paycheck buying old Godzilla movies in really bad quality. And yeah, man, that was that was it, man. You worked all week long, and then Saturday we drove to the mall, went to the food court. That's the only place that we saw a Chick-fil-A was in the mall.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that I mean, I don't really remember them being out in the world too much. They were always
yeah,
inside of the mall.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's a good point because now they're everywhere,
yeah.
but back then they were
That's
not.
that's kind of where
And
they
then
were, and you walked out going, "Why can't you get this somewhere else? Because these chicken nuggets are awesome."
well, then you also had like obviously you had your anchor stores, so you had your
Yep.
Sears, your Montgomery Wards, which you know my mom worked at Montgomery Wards in the 70s when my dad
Huh.
went in to rent a suit to go to a wedding and met my mom,
Wow.
and that's yeah. So and that's at the Memorial City Mall, which I live like 2 miles away from right now. So the Memorial City Mall has survived uh, all of the retail collapse. I mean, it's still thriving, and the parking lot's full every day. So even now, in the middle of freaking pandemic lockdown, the parking lot for the mall is packed full. So that tells you something.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude. So like then they had the big fountains in the middle
Oh
where you
yeah.
could throw your pennies in there and get your wishes on. Then uh, it was always there. And I remember going in, and my mom like there's the novelty thing where like the little dude would pull down his pants and water would squirt out at Spencer Gifts.
Spencer's. Yep.
Spencer's. I mean, and then of course getting older, Spencer's is where you get your Halloween costumes.
Oh yeah.
They
Right.
for somehow or another it was probably a corporate thing, but they had a CD with all of like a whole bunch of B-sides and stuff. So you'd go into Spencer's and you'd hear like Radiohead, but it wasn't Creep. It was
Right.
some other track off the record that
Yeah.
hadn't, that wasn't on the radio, but it was in Spencer's. So they were like that kind of underground cool. And
Yeah,
then they were the
made the
ones,
story even cooler for sure. Yeah.
and then they'd have like all the naughty stuff, and then the posters. I
Oh yeah.
mean, like,
Yeah.
um, I think most of the T-shirts that I wore came from Spencer's at
Oh
some
yeah.
point because they were always like that little side of risque and just kind of a little bit rebellious, and band shirts and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
always, I mean, you spent your paycheck at Suncoast. I was probably dropping bills at Spencer's a bit more.
I spent my share there too, man.
But then you'd go to the movies, so that was always fun because you go to
Yeah.
the movies and see something like Batman, like in '89. It's like I
Yeah.
posted on the forum that one day about I'd been to big movies before, right? Like, but in 88, 89, that's whenever we moved back to Houston. So a lot of movies, a lot of blockbusters that I'd seen had been past their prime, like because by the time my parents would get around to wanting to go drive the half hour over to Corpus to watch the movie, they weren't going to go wait in the line for it. Like,
Right.
especially when they've got two kids. They're like, hey, we're just, or they got a babysitter and left me at home. Right. So like Batman, which, hit me right at that right spot because I was like 13 years old. So, you got Kim Basinger in there just like
Oh yeah.
smoking hot. And then you got Batman just being super cool and Jack Nicholson. You didn't know him yet. Like I didn't know him from
Sure.
all of his other movies,
Yeah.
but I knew he was a big deal and he's just knocking it out of the park with the Joker. You go watch Batman and then you walk through the mall and that merchandising monster,
Oh yeah.
I mean, every store had Batman stuff.
Yeah.
Spencer's had the posters and the baseball hats and the T-shirt. Like it was really like going to Disney World at the time, because you ride the
Right.
roller coaster and come off the roller coaster and there's a shirt for the roller coaster and you're like, I want this.
Right.
So,
You walk by the music shop and they've got the Batman soundtrack, cover up on the window or whatever.
mhm.
So yeah, I mean,
And,
it was
and they
in
did a
full
good one.
swing.
Oh yeah, because Batman had two soundtracks.
Yeah.
It had the Prince soundtrack and it had the Danny Elfman
Danny
score.
Elfman, yeah.
So you had to buy two CDs. Oh yeah, but yeah, to again to be that that preteen teenager in 1989 whenever that movie came out and to just get the full, they knew exactly what they were doing.
Oh yeah.
The Great American Cookie Company is selling
Oh.
Batman shaped cookies.
I'm glad you said that, man, because the first time I ever walked in that's one of the first things you would see when you'd walk into the mall we went to. And I just remember the first time I walked in there, I was probably, 11 years old. And I'd never been to a mall before that. And when my mom remarried, he suggested we go do shopping for my school clothes at the mall, which was something we never did before. We always did like outlet stuff, around close to home. So yeah, that first trip, man, I remember walking in there and seeing the cookies and just thinking, you mean you can make a cookie as big as a pizza?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in heaven, right? So I mean,
Dude,
yeah.
and they used to have free samples. I don't know if they knew now, but it used to be you could walk by and get a sample and then like turn your hat back around the other way and walk in the other direction.
Yeah. It just the concept, man. I mean, this is kid logic, but hey, you know how to make a chocolate chip cookie even better? Let's put some icing on it. And you're just going,
Yep.
how did we never think of this before?
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah.
Then you had, Walden Books or B. Dalton's, and a lot of times both. Like you'd have one at one end of the mall and the other at the other. So, it's like comic books, paperbacks, magazines. So again, you kicking, walk out of Batman. Now I need to get some Batman comics. And then there's like the souvenir Batman magazine that's like kind of a companion to the movie. There's a novelization.
Right.
So, like you're just walking, like I said, it's just like Disney World. You got the hat, you got the shirt, you got the bags full of the Batman loot, and like everywhere you go in the mall, it's
See what? Well, you're the guy that was looking at that, but I'm the guy that was like 3 shelves down from you with the mullet and tore up jeans that was looking at Hit Parader.
Oh, dude. I was absolutely looking at Hit Parader, man. I wish I would have kept them. I used to have a stack of rock and heavy metal.
I've still got some, man.
Circus, Hit Parader,
Metal Edge.
Metal Edge. Oh yeah. And I had a stack of them, but I also pull the pictures out and hang the pictures on the wall.
Oh yeah.
Those were so cool. I read those articles. Like you said, you read the liner notes, but then you'd also read the articles, and they're always cutting up and doing crazy stuff. And the articles were so great. And then it was later, a couple of years when I was started reading like Guitar World.
Yeah.
And those were awesome because they had a tablature in the middle, so you could learn how to play the song, and it would be like some new something or other that's on the radio, and then like Wish You Were Here. And so it's like the new thing that's on the radio is pretty easy. something you can learn with the 3 or 4 chords, but then you go to Wish You Were Here, and it's a whole lot harder. But
Oh yeah.
it was like getting a 1,000-piece puzzle. You're sitting there being like, okay, I gotta work on this. But yeah, dude.
Yeah, the bookstores, man. Because I mean, again, just the whole experience, being able to walk in one store and out of the other, and they were just totally different worlds. And for the longest time, you weren't used to that. You were used to, like I said, a Walmart or back in the day, it was a Ben Franklin's. I don't know if you remember Ben Franklin's or not, but Kmart, so those kind of shops. So now you're going into specified, stores and crap, man. I mean, every time you walk by, Fredericks of Hollywood, you're looking in there,
Oh, yeah.
just in case somebody's trying something on.
Well, and that's another, because that's where all the girls hung out too. Not at Fredericks Hollywood, of course, but you'd be at the mall, and even if you didn't have any money, because I don't know how many times, like I got in trouble, because like I didn't have any money, and so I couldn't call my parents to come tell them to pick me up. So they're all like, "Well, where have you been?" I'm like, "I've been at the mall." I'm like, "Why didn't you call us to come pick you up?" It's like, because I didn't. My dad's like, "You, it's like you stick a quarter in your shoe. You always at least have money to call home." And I remember that being such a bitch, because I got the quarter, and then it's like 2 months later they raised the rate to 35 cents in the mall. Because there was kids just hanging around, like using the payphones, and there was like some scandal thinking like, because they actually the actual payphone rate went to 35 cents like 5 or 6 years later, but the mall raised the rate because they were worried about kids selling drugs, because drugs, of course, was bad, and the news ran a thing. It's kind of like Satan in the 80s, where it's like. Are your kids listening to music? They're probably Satanists. Like, if your kid's hanging out in the mall, then they're probably buying drugs. So the mall raised the.
So I'm still trying to think of the logic there. Hey, these kids are selling drugs, so we might as well get our portion of it. Let's jack up the phone price.
Yeah. It's just not as convenient to use the phone whenever you have to put in more coins than a quarter, I guess. But
yeah, but if you're a kid selling drugs, then an extra coin is probably not a problem. But you're really hurting the kid down here that's trying to buy the Batman stuff.
That's true. I just remember it was Dad got all mad at me because it's just like overstaying your curfew or whatever.
Right.
It's like, where have you been? You were supposed to mow the lawn. I'm like, didn't really do much.
So when you think about all that, and you think about this scenario you're talking about with the selling the drugs and stuff, can't help but think of Fast Times, the Ridgemont High, the guy that's selling the tickets and all that stuff. It's like, it's that guy. You're the reason the rates went up.
Yep. Well, and dude, you mentioned Fredericks of Hollywood, and now you just mentioned the guy scalping tickets.
Yeah.
So when I wanted to go see a concert, we had to go to the lingerie section. So it wasn't the lingerie section of Foley's. What was the customer service department, where you'd go for your returns, all of their central customer service department was in a spot. And then they remodeled the floor and put all the ladies' underwear in front of this customer service department. So every Saturday morning at 8 a.m., whenever Ticketmaster would open, you'd have all of these metalheads lining up to buy tickets to like Marilyn Manson, but they'd have to go through the ladies' laundry section to get there. And so I remember many a time standing in that line, like waiting to buy my tickets. And there was always, it's like, it's just the anachronism. There's some old lady, and she'd stand behind the counter, and she'd all dressed smartly in her little pantsuit.
Oh, yeah.
She'd be like, she'd pull up the thing, and you'd be like, come on, man, these tickets are gonna sell out like super fast, because scalpers were bad back then. So you're like, okay, I want to go see. What was we gonna go see? Like Aerosmith or Van Halen or something. Van Halen sold out from under me. My friend bought his tickets, and then they were sold out when I tried to buy them. Yeah. So it was like that kind of. But the person in front of you would be like, okay, you want to see who?
Yeah, that's right. The Who, right?
Yeah. Oh
So
no, we'd
he
have like some like Megadeth. Like
right.
it would be something like Morbid Angel, and she'd be sitting there like typing it in with one finger each.
So here you go. Here's your tickets to Corpse Grinder. I hope you have a good time.
Exactly, precisely that. And we'd all just laugh because it was just like like she probably is going to church tonight just to watch being around us off.
Just the fact that she had to type those words,
Uh huh. But
Uh,
oh yeah, going to the mall. That was central. That's where
yeah,
you got your concert tickets.
yeah,
That's where you saw your movies. I mean, it was a hub. That's
right.
where you. That's where my parents met. Like I met my wife in a bar, but but that's because we were both working there. But
Yeah,
at some point then things got a little bit homogenized.
sure.
To where now that mall that I tell you is still open. It's open and busy, but there's a Target on one end and there's like a Macy's on the other end, and everything in between is women's clothes.
Yeah,
There's no bookstore, there's no toy store, there's no video store, there's no music shop, there's no novelty shops, there's no Spencer's, Radio Shack. Even Radio Shack's gone.
oh yeah,
Like everything's gone. So it's just like,
yeah.
well, this
And
this
you
place kind
see,
of sucks.
you kind of see it in your people that they hate the digital format of anything, music, movies, and stuff. They want that tangible thing that you can hold. That really goes back to this exact experience because shopping is so convenient now, which is great,
Mm-hmm.
but you're missing that event, right? That tangible thing, walking up and grabbing the new cassette and checking it out before you buy it and all this stuff. They've got posters of it hanging down because it's this new album and it's supposed to be really great, and you're holding it in your hand. You're like, oh wow, I wonder what this song sounds like. Where now everything is so instant. So to me, that's so much of what we hear with people reacting to this stuff because it takes that nostalgia away from you. And it's sad because you can't really make anyone that hasn't experienced it understand it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can't make them understand the excitement of hey, there's this restaurant in the food court called Sapporo, and it looked like really good pizza. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and
And a buddy of mine worked there, man, and I remember I he was like 6 or 8 months older than me, so I wasn't old enough to get a job yet. And we were like, man, we need to get jobs so we can buy music, like that kind of a thing. It's like we need to get jobs so we can get stuff. And he went up to Sbarro and just asked for an application. The guy's like, when can you start? And he's like, I can start right now. He's like, start right now. We're
wow,
shorthanded. Come on back here. Let's get your hands washed up and let's show you how to do it. And I remember because he and I were sitting at the table, we had ordered a slice of pizza, and he got taken back. And I'm sitting there just being so jealous. And I'm 15 years old, and I'm like so jealous that like that should have been me because working at the pizza place, where do the girls go? Like
yeah,
I'd
right,
stand there and eat free pizza all day long and get paid, and then go dump my paycheck off at Sam Goodies and
right.
Spencer's. Like that's the life right there.
So you had to take your chances at Panda Express, didn't you?
Well, I couldn't get a job. Like I finally, when I did turn 16, actually I was still 15, I think. My dad talked to the manager of our little grocery store. There's a little grocery store right outside of our neighborhood, and it was Continental Finer Foods. And my dad, because I was bugging my dad constantly, it was summertime. My dad was like, mow yards. I'm like, dude, it's 100 degrees outside. I don't want to mow any of the yards. I want to go work in the mall. And he was like, but anyway, he talked to this guy. He was like, oh, hey, if you hiring, my son's looking for a job. And dude's name was Johnny. He's like, well, when does he turn 16? He's like, September. He's like, okay, I can bring him in and get him trained and kind of sort of off the books for, a couple of months. And so I got to start working at the grocery store, sacking groceries, stocking beer and milk in the back, and, just kind of do general knock around, and then they paid me in cash, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then then when I turned 16, I filled out all the paperwork and actually started working there. But yeah, so I was working at the grocery store, and my buddy was working at Sbarro's around the corner, and in the mall. But yeah, dude, they would cash the paycheck right there. So it'd be Friday, you get your paycheck,
Yeah.
and you could cash it for like $2, and
Yeah.
so they just cash you out.
Cash it,
And
grab you some food while you're there because you're gonna get a discount on it. Then you go down to Camelot or the video store,
mhm,
you buy your stuff, and then you go hang out in the mall for a few hours. I mean, in
yep,
the arcade for a couple hours.
that's it. And we we talked about the arcade.
Oh yeah,
The Memorial City, the one that we had back then, we had 3 arcades in it. It's a pretty big mall,
yeah,
but we had 3. We had the movie theater arcade on one end of the mall, and on the other end of the mall, we had it's kind of a grown-up arcade. It was called Green's Game Room, and it was open until midnight. And it
wow,
had its own entrance from the outside of the mall. So when the mall closed, you'd come in this way.
yeah.
And that's where all those elite like Street Fighter players would go and like line up quarters and then we had what was it called, the tilt? I mean, we had a tilt, but that was in the other mall. But there was another one that was on the other opposite, because if you're looking at the mall from the top, it looks kind of like a cross. So you have
Yeah.
one end and the other, and then this end and this end, and there was like 3 arcades. And oh man, you couldn't spit without hitting a Mortal Kombat machine. It was
Right. Yeah.
and we were in there dumping quarters, like ripping people's heads off. It was amazing.
Well, Jackson had one arcade that it outgrew really fast, and then they just started setting the games out in the actual hallways of the mall. So you just be walking by, here down here by J.C. Penney. Hey, here's Mortal Kombat. Just
Nice.
out there in the middle. Right across from KB Toys. No less.
KB was awesome too.
KB was the shiz, man.
KB was great.
First time I walked in one, they had one of those big Rodans hanging down from the ceiling, like the one that you see the kid has in Creepshow.
hmm
Always wanted one of those. I never got one, but I was like, I walked in, I saw that, and I was like, this store is for me.
Oh, dude, we were still. I was still hanging out in KB when I was in high school. Like,
Oh, sure.
toy. I'm not even into toys anymore, but man, they got some cool stuff. And then I
Yeah.
had all kinds of really neat novelty stuff, little magic tricks and games and stuff that was kind of up at the front by the registers, like all this little weird like slime and that
Oh, yeah.
stuff that farted when you squeezed it, and
Yeah.
like all kinds of fun stuff there. And I love KB.
I was into
And
all the battery powered electronic games of the time.
hmm
I remember buying.
oh
a
yeah, and
little,
they sold video games.
oh
And,
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it was just it was incredible to walk in there and the whole store is nothing but toys.
yeah.
And again, you've only been to department stores that are your WalMarts and stuff, so you get 2 or 3 aisles. Whereas here you got a whole store just dedicated to it. So amazing.
hmm Yeah, I miss toy stores, man. Like, especially, I feel bad because, like, with my kids, because I got 2 girls. So you go to, like, Target. They got Target of all of the places has, like, the best toy selection.
Hmm.
But you got, like, a row of baby stuff and a row of girl stuff, and then, like,
Right.
5 rows of boy stuff. So it's leveled itself out now because the stuff they're into is not as toy
Right.
centric. So like my older one is starting to get more into music and books. So for her, she a present to her is like a half price books run or a Barnes and Noble or a music store.
Yeah.
In fact, right now she's on me because I promised her I would burn her. She wants me to burn her Iron Maiden. She wants.
Yeah.
She's like, Dad, will you please burn me because I've got the that Somewhere Back in Time that's
Yeah.
just like all the greatest hits. She's like, you said you were gonna burn it for me, and I've almost been just kind of putting it off because it's like my 9-year-old little girl is going to be sitting in there jamming to lyrics like, it's like, we're going to kill the unborn in it. In the womb. And it's like, she knows these words and she sings them. And I'm like, well, I can't leave 2 minutes to midnight off because she'll notice. But I also don't want her, like, friends coming over.
Right.
And like, man.
She goes to school and she goes, you take my life, but I'll take yours too.
Yeah, the trooper.
What are you singing?
Like, oh, dude.
666, the number of the beast.
Dude, that record comes on in the car, and both of my kids, in perfect harmony, like, can I play with madness? And my wife just looks at me like, and I'm like, hey, man, it's.
There's just some things you have to do as a parent, man. I mean, and this is one of them, right?
Yeah.
Because I never will forget, we were sitting in a house one day, and my daughter came through. She's maybe 15, coming up on 16. She just walks through and says, I love Iron Maiden. I looked at my wife and I said, my job here is done.
Dude. Well, I told you I was reading that autobiography of Bruce Dickinson.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because on the one hand, he drinks a lot of beer, but he's not wasted all the time, and he explains that he couldn't really partake in a lot of the stuff that everybody else did because of the fragility of his voice. He's like, I work really, really hard to do what I do. And he's like, any little thing, like sleeping in an air-conditioned room can throw me off really badly. So he's like, the drugs of choice, like cocaine, can't do them. Anything that's smoked can't do it. Anything that's, he's like, can't do it. So he's sober describing how all of this stuff was while everybody else, but he's like they're doing a sound check somewhere in Canada, and he looks up and he sees a bunch of dudes hanging out in the back of the theater, and he's like, who are these guys? And it's Johnny Cash and his band. And Johnny Cash walks up and he's like, can I get an autograph? My daughter's a huge fan. I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Right.
That's really cool,
We'll have to do us a Maiden episode, man. I mean, there's just way too much stuff we can talk about there.
Certainly. But yeah, well, like you said, it's things we have to do. If Johnny Cash is going to go show up to an Iron Maiden sound check and get an autograph for his daughter in the early '80s, then if Johnny Cash approves,
it's pretty hard to argue with, right?
Oh, back to the video games. So you saw I posted on Instagram. You saw my little watch.
Yeah, man, that's killer.
So sometimes these things pop up and you just can't turn them away. But sometimes I think from doing this show and posting stuff on the group, just certain keywords and things, then I get strange advertising. And one of the things popped up and it's like, whoa, it's this Timex watch and it's the 40th anniversary of Pac-Man, and so here's a Pac-Man version of this watch. And I'm like, he's sold. I'm in. And so it showed up, and I don't know if it's a everyday wear because it's kind of small for my wrist, but it sure is awesome.
It's kind of like when they came out with the Atari 2600 mini console that had all the games built in. Mm-hmm. I didn't even have to think about it. I was like, yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. I'll take it. Don't questions asked.
You see the advertisement for it, and you just go, like, walk through the house and hop in your car. Your wife's like, where are you going? And be like, be right back.
I'll be right back. Oh. Yeah, man. And so many things. Again, you can almost have a checklist when you think about the mall stuff. I mean, you think about arcades, check. Dippin' Dots, check.
Still the ice cream of the future, even though it's like 40 years old.
Hey, they didn't lie, did they?
Yeah, well, that's
still around. The pretzel shop, the cookie shop, Spencer's, Suncoast. I mean, this was the list of the stores you were going to go. Now, in my case, I had one clothing store that I actually would go check out, and it was a place called Jeans West. Okay. I was really into a lot of their stuff, man. I thought they had some pretty cool clothing for the time, and that was my clothing store that I would go to. But
we had one called Miller's Outpost that you could get like jeans and shirts and stuff at. But there's also a lot more stuff for guys back then. So you had the different shops like Now, like that was one of those things talking to my daughter because she's like, "Why don't you like going to the mall? Like, let's go. Like, it's cool." I was like, "Baby, it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
It's like all that stuff that we're talking about isn't there." She's like, "Why?" It's like it's all women's clothes, and she thinks about Macy's, and she's like, "Is that why like the whole bottom floor of Macy's is women's stuff, and then we go upstairs, then half of it's also women's stuff, and there's just that other little bit that's men's stuff?" And I was like, "No,
Yep.
that other half of the top floor, a quarter of it's men's stuff, and then the other half of that is the housewares and the furniture." She's like, "Oh." I was like, "So you're learning fractions? What? how much of that?" Like, that's the only men's stuff in the entire mall. She's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I see why you wouldn't want to go there."
And again, let's face it, we never went to the mall to get clothes really in the first place. That was just
No, if you needed clothes, you go to
right.
the mall.
Well, sure,
But
you gave you another excuse to go to the mall.
uh-huh.
Yeah, man, great times. I mean, just it brings back so many cool memories. Like I said, that first trip, they had this a little island. Those little island stands they would have it in the middle of the mall. So it wasn't like a real store, but they'd give them a little hut to work out of.
Hmm.
And this guy was making personal T-shirts or whatever. And it had this cool Black Panther with a Japanese flag behind it. And I got that put on the back, and then it had a little small print that I had put on the front. I mean, it's just like it was like the greatest day ever that you could go get this customized shirt. You're going back to school, and you're getting this stuff that the other kids are shopping around locally, where you're gonna all wear kind of the same thing and go to the same shops, and you just felt like you were really breaking away from the herd, going to this other place. So it was just
Absolutely.
it was rare for my area.
Well, I finally got the. I did end up working in a mall several times, actually. I guess because right after, I guess, my senior year of high school, I started working at Radio Shack, and it was a part-time gig, and the store was right by my house, so I could literally get out of school. I could walk from the school to the store. I could work from 3 to 8, and I could walk home, and it was still kind of daylight, in the summer months, and be home by like 8:30, right? So
Yeah.
like, it was a good location, good job. Well, I got a call one day because they were what Radio Shack would do, the way it was structured, it was really kind of janky, but it worked out for me really well. Is they would they would hire up for the holidays, but they would take like seasoned people and put them in their busier stores, and then they dump the new people on to the neighborhood stores
Right.
because they didn't want new people clogging up the works whenever, like, so if customer walks into the store and they're like, "Hey, can you help me with this problem that I have, like an electronic, like a fuse is burnt out or something?" They didn't want their good salespeople to be bogged down by that, so they
Sure.
move people from the outside, from the stores to the malls. So I'm sitting there one day, and I get a phone call from my district manager. 'Cause the store calls, and I answer the phone, and he's like, "Hey, how you liking working for John?" I'm like, it's all right. What's going on?" He's like, "I was actually calling to talk to you to see if you wanted to work at the Galleria." Well, the Galleria, Houston Galleria, is like one of the biggest malls in the country. And if you're working on commission basis, you're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Why wouldn't
absolutely.
you?
Especially during the holidays, because people are just walking in, stacking stuff up and running a credit card. You don't have to
Right.
talk to them. You just have to ring it, and you're like
give me
piling
give me
cash.
that Casio keyboard and give me a robot.
Yep. No kidding. So I was like, yes. So I moved from the neighborhood store to the Galleria, which was an experience working at that mall at Christmas time.
Oh
Because
yeah.
even though we had to be there at because I was working like 12 and 13-hour shifts. I was working from 9 to 9 every day, which was fine because I was making a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of money. And if I was off, I was hanging out there anyway because because it was the awesome mall to be at, and I knew people. So
Yeah.
just it was a different change of scenery from where. So I worked through that holiday season. I got transferred out of the store after the holidays, worked for another one that I didn't like so much, and then I ended up going to work for the sporting goods store, which was right next to the mall over by my house here.
Yeah.
It's the sporting goods store since gone. Well, I worked at the sporting goods store for a couple 3 years, and then I got crosswise with my boss there, and I got pissed. So I went to lunch and I walked across the street, and I knew the manager of the Radio Shack there, and I was like, "Hey, are you hiring?" She's like, "Yes. Can you start right now?" And I was like, "As a matter of fact, let me walk back over here and quit this job, and then I'll be right back." So I ended up working at the mall twice in two different Radio Shacks over the course of a couple of years. But in two of the malls that I wanted to work with, because they were where all the girls were.
Right.
It was rad. So and that was kind of like right on the tail end. Like that was kind of, I worked at that last Radio Shack at let's say like 97, 98. So as soon as I left that, and I went into the bars and started doing the marketing gig, and then that's when the malls started to turn over. All those old fun things kind of started to shrivel up and go away. So I was fortunate that I was able to work in the mall when all that stuff was still there, and I could be a part of that culture.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it's almost being like, I was old enough to see certain bands in concert, like saw them when they were on the club shows. I got to work in the mall before it turned into one big, outlet store.
Right.
So the mall has a very special place in my heart because
sure,
had a lot of really good times there.
Well, look at the movies that you and I love, and specifically in the horror genre, and look how many are based in the malls, right? I mean, and one of the greatest horror movies ever made is about people dying and coming back to life and revisiting the mall because that's just what they did, right?
Yeah.
I love that explanation. It's like, well, why are they here? Because that's the only thing they really kind of remember is this is where they wanted to be. And that says a lot. I mean, I know George gets credit for being a genius on some levels with that kind of stuff. Some of it he might have planned, some of it maybe not. And he said, "Oh yeah, that's what I meant." But that really hits home, man, because that's where the country was in that time and age. It was the mall.
Mm-hmm. I remember at the beginning of Dawn of the Dead how they're in that helicopter. And they're like, "What's that?" And they're like, "Oh, that's one of those huge indoor shopping centers. They call it a mall." Like you need that kind of a description. But it was that in 72, so 71, 72. So they were still pretty new as a concept.
Dawn is 79, isn't it?
Was it?
Yeah.
Because I thought Night of was 68. So
yeah, Night of 68. Dawn
it took them 10 years to make the second
78.
One? Wow.
Let me check, make sure. 78.
78, wow. So it wasn't like the Friday the 13th where they just started churning out the new one while the credits on the first one rolled.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of time between his flicks, and that was always that thing. But anyways, it's just the fact of George saw it coming, knew it was going to be a big deal, and here we are today still talking about him because it was the hip, awesome place to be.
Well, and you saw in Stranger Things, man, they really, they did justice to that entire culture.
Yep.
With them. I mean, in fact, that was even, I mean, it was so thoroughly explored that they even went into the hallways behind the stores.
Yeah.
Which, having been an employee, there is those hallways behind the stores where you can move through, like the delivery docks and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
That's a whole different culture too of just the employees, because you step out the back there to have a smoke and chat with people from the store next door without getting talked to by customers or asked directions or whatever. So that in and of itself is a whole other thing whenever you work there, which was neat that they explored that. I mean, they had to, because that got them into their elevators and down into their bunker and stuff under the mall. Right. But it was nice to see, because I was a part of that world that I lived in as well. So Um, and then they destroyed it, the good old Starcourt.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
keep up with Stranger Things?
I do, man. I'm
It,
anxious to see where it goes next.
Me too. They've every time because the first season was awesome.
Yeah.
Then the difference, the distance between the first and second season, I was like, watch the second season. I was like, I don't know how they did it because the first season was perfect, but the
Yeah,
second season was somehow better.
yeah,
And then same thing with season three. And I think it's because they're so different from one another
yeah,
that it's because season three was a straight up horror movie, and I mean some
yeah,
of those. So some of those, I mean, you had Halloween 2 in there, you had Alien, you had so many like
yeah.
we're talking like almost perfect by shot. These were not like accidental or homages. They were
Right. Yeah.
like absolutely reconstructed shots to make you be like, the Terminator,
Right.
like
But
all of that
that's how
fun.
they sold this series anyways, because they basically took scenes from their all-time favorite movies and kind of pieced them together and created a story out of it. So it's a brilliant idea, and we're just fortunate that it showed us the underbelly and the mall life of the '80s.
Yeah,
So and
totally.
it's very accurate.
Hmm. They're so much fun. They're so much fun. If you
Yeah,
guys haven't watched Stranger Things because of
yeah.
whatever reason, put that on your binge list. You will not be disappointed. If you're listening to us and you haven't watched Stranger Things, you're missing out because it's if you like us, it's right up your alley.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Well, we are bumping up against an hour, so let's. Got any final thoughts on the mall, man?
Yeah, I just talking about this just makes me kind of want to go back and stand in the sun coast for about 3 hours, looking at everything in there and saying, "Yeah, I need that Scarface statue for some reason," and
Mm-hmm.
and the Princess Leia over there, and it's amazing that again, it's just the fact of you didn't see this stuff anywhere else, so you felt like you were seeing how the other half lives, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's like I said. Between going there when I was little, hanging out there when I was bigger, the summertime was just full of the mall, and
Yeah,
it was fit in somewhere during the day. You were there every other day or every day or at least a couple times a week. And you'd leave the mall to go swimming and then dry off and then go back over there to watch a movie. I mean, it was just you were just
yeah,
in it. That was just what you did.
yeah,
And like you say, there's an entire culture that revolved around it, and we all like whether we knew each other or not, we all have the same and similar experiences because it was a pretty homogenized sort of situation. I mean, you had the same stores pretty much in the same in malls all around the country, so kids all over the nation kind of had that same experience, but
yeah,
to have it be so strangely short lived whenever you think about what has happened over the last like 10, 15 years, and they're
yeah.
just kind of going away in favor of streaming and Amazon and stuff like that. That's why every now and then, like I still, as much as I can, like I like to have physical product. I like to buy a
Sure.
CD or a DVD or a VHS even, which VHSs I get at Goodwill, but often I'll get a movie for a quarter, and it works just fine. And I like the way the old formats look because a lot of
Yeah,
times, especially, I mean, if they get the proper transfer and the Blu-ray treatment, but like I've got DVDs of some old slashers. Friday the 13th Part 6 is one of them. It's
yeah,
like you watch it on DVD, and it looks like a dude in a mask walking through a set with like rubber plants.
yeah,
You throw in the same thing on VHS, and it looks like a psychopath walking. Because it's just that
yeah.
proper amount of fuzzy.
Right.
It's that low def sort of look that is what the movie was made on and what it was
Yep.
made for. So
Yeah.
sometimes whenever you can over qualify the
Yeah.
format, sometimes ruins the magic.
I totally
And
agree. I totally agree. And the majority of the movies that I have such a fondness for, I'm glad that they put the effort into cleaning it up. But what made this movie popular was not the fact that it needed cleaning up. It was perfect the way that it was. Texas
Mm-hmm.
Chainsaw gets a little weaker every time we re-release it because we keep getting the grit out of it.
Yeah,
You know?
and that needs to be gritty because that's.
Yeah.
I mean, that's. I would say that is 90% of its atmosphere is how
Yeah.
dirty and just kind of
Yeah.
like it looks like a found footage piece. It looks like something that got picked up and popped in, and you're like, what happened here? Oh my god! So
Right.
the more that you clean off, the more it looks too slick, too
Right.
cool, too yeah.
Yep.
Totally agree. Well, cool, man. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and press stop so that we can get on to the next thing. But hit us up on the forums. Share your favorite memories of the mall because there's a lot of them. And we will see you next time.